Every person who is working themselves into the ground right now believes the same thing. They believe that is exactly what they are supposed to be doing. They believe the exhaustion is the point. They believe that somewhere on the other side of enough early mornings and enough late nights and enough sacrificed weekends, the life they are building will finally show up. They are wrong, not slightly off course, not close but missing a detail. Structurally, fundamentally, built from the ground up wrong. Here is what makes that so strange. Look at the people who actually have the money. Look at them carefully. Not the image they project, not the story the culture tells about them, but the actual texture of their days. You will find something that does not fit the story you have been handed. They are not grinding the way you are grinding. They work differently. They think about effort differently. In many cases, by any honest measure, they appear to be doing far less. And they are getting richer while you are getting tired. That is not an accident. It is not luck. It is not a moral failure on your part. It is a design. There is a specific mechanic operating underneath the surface of wealth that almost no one talks about plainly, because plainly is not how it gets taught. What you have been told about effort and money is not just incomplete. It is the precise inversion of how building wealth actually works. And the longer you believe it, the more it costs you. By the time you finish listening, you will not be able to look at your own effort the same way again. Chapter 1. Working harder is making you poorer. There is a pattern woven through every society that has ever accumulated wealth, and then watched that wealth pass from hand to hand across generations. In every era, in every corner of the world where some people prosper and others exhaust themselves trying, the same quiet contradiction appears. The ones who work the least hours do not earn the least money. They earn the most. This has never been about talent. It has never been about luck, not entirely. It is about something more unsettling than either of those things, a completely different understanding of what work is actually for. That understanding has existed for as long as people have traded and built and accumulated. It has been practiced quietly, passed on in small rooms rather than loud classrooms, and buried beneath a louder story that serves a very different purpose. You have heard that louder story your whole life. What you are about to hear is the quieter one. And the reason it will feel strange at first is that it directly contradicts almost everything you were praised for. Here is the question that will follow you through this entire chapter, the one you should hold loosely in the back of your mind as you listen. If working harder is the answer, why do the hardest workers you know have the least? Picture a swimmer in open water, not a relaxed, recreational swimmer, someone fighting. Arms churning, legs kicking, water spraying in every direction, lungs starting to burn. From the shore, if you squinted, you might almost mistake the frenzy of motion for speed. But look closer. That swimmer is barely moving forward. Every ounce of energy goes into not sinking. The effort is enormous. The progress is almost zero. And the tragedy is not that this person is weak. The tragedy is that they are doing exactly what instinct tells them to do, and instinct in this case is wrong. That swimmer is you. That swimmer is most people you grew up with, most people in your city, most people on the planet who were handed the same instructions you were. Work hard, stay busy, earn what you deserve. Good advice wrapped around a fatal flaw. You probably know what it feels like to be that swimmer. You have had weeks, maybe entire years, where you put in more hours than you thought a person could survive. Early mornings, late nights, weekends that dissolved into the work week so smoothly you stopped noticing the difference. You did everything right. You showed up. You grinded, to use the word your generation was handed like a badge of honor. And at the end of all that motion, you looked at your bank account, your savings, your sense of progress, and the numbers did not match the effort. They did not come close. That gap between effort and result is not your fault, but it is your problem. Here is the thing most people do not want to say out loud. The system you are working inside was not built to reward your effort. It was built to consume it. Every extra hour you give, every Saturday you sacrifice, every boundary you dissolve in the name of dedication, those things have a buyer. And that buyer is not you. Think about where you were 3 years ago. The hours you were putting in, the pace you were keeping, the promises you made to yourself about what it would produce. Are you where you expected to be by now? Not where you hoped in some vague, dreamy sense, where you concretely expected to be, based on the work you have actually done. Most people, if they answer that honestly, feel a quiet vertigo, because the answer is no. And the reason it is no is not a personal failing. It is a structural one. This is where the story gets interesting. A woman named Clara worked at a shipping warehouse for 11 years. She knew every process, every shortcut, every way to move faster and do more in less time. She was the first person her supervisor called when something went wrong. She worked harder than anyone around her, and she knew it, and she was proud of it. Her paycheck after 11 years was 31% higher than when she started. 31% over 11 years. Meanwhile, the man who owned that warehouse, a man named Dennis who came in 2 mornings a week and spent most of his time on phone calls in his car, had tripled the value of what he owned in the same period. Dennis was not smarter than Clara. He was not more disciplined. He was not a better person by any reasonable measure. The difference was not effort. The difference was position. Clara's effort produced output. Dennis's position produced ownership. Output gets paid once. Ownership keeps paying. That story will feel unfair if you let it. And the unfairness is real. No one should minimize it. But sitting with the unfairness will not change what is true. What is true is this: effort and reward are not on the same axis. They never have been. The people who accumulate wealth are not the ones who put in the most effort per hour. They are the ones who place their effort where it creates ongoing results rather than one-time transactions. Later in this book, you will encounter something that directly contradicts what most people believe about rest, specifically about what rest is doing to your wealth while you are doing it. And once you see it, the contradiction will resolve in a way that changes exactly how you spend your time. But right now, stay here. Stay with the swimmer. The drowning swimmer does not need to try harder. The drowning swimmer needs to stop fighting the water and start using it. There is a technique. Anyone who has ever taken a basic water safety course knows it, where you stop thrashing, roll onto your back, spread your weight across the surface, and let the water hold you. You float. It feels completely wrong to a person who is panicking. It feels like giving up. It feels like laziness even, but floating keeps you alive. Fighting the water eventually does not. The rich are not working harder than you. On average, by most honest measurements, they are working less. Not because they are morally superior or born lucky, though some of them were, but because somewhere, either by design or by accident, they stopped swimming and started floating. They stopped converting their hours into money and started building things that converted other things into money for them. Effort without leverage is expensive motion. Read that sentence again with your ears. Effort without leverage is expensive motion. You spend energy, real energy, irreplaceable hours of your one life. You get back a payment that is smaller than the value you created. And then you do it again tomorrow. This is not a flaw in your character. It is the definition of labor inside a system that was designed long before you arrived. The system is not evil, but it is not on your side either. It is indifferent. It will take every hour you offer and return you a fraction. The hustle gospel, the cultural belief that exhaustion is proof of virtue and busyness is proof of progress. is the most expensive lie most people will ever believe. It is expensive not because it is lazy or false about the value of effort. Effort matters. Real effort, well placed, is one of the most powerful things a human being can deploy. It is expensive because it points effort in the wrong direction. It makes you proud of motion instead of proud of position. It rewards you for swimming harder instead of teaching you to float. The harder you work inside a bad system, the deeper you dig, not because hard work is bad, but because the system is using your hard work as fuel, and you are not the engine in this arrangement. You are the fuel. Here is where the question closes, the one I asked you to hold at the start. Why do the hardest workers you know have the least? Because they are selling the most valuable thing they own, time, at the lowest possible price, 1 hour at a time, in a market that was set up to buy it cheaply. They are not failing at success. They are succeeding at someone else's plan. The rest of this book is about building your own. And the first thing you need to know before any of that is possible is the answer to this. If effort is not the engine of wealth, what is? Chapter 2. Your boss sold you a losing bet. Before you answer that question, what the engine of wealth actually is, you need to dismantle something that is sitting in the way. Something you have believed for so long it does not feel like a belief anymore. It feels like gravity. Here is what almost every person who is working hard right now believes about money. They believe that the more hours you put in, the more you earn. They believe that trading your time for a wage is the foundation of financial progress. Most people hold this belief so deeply they would be offended if you questioned it. And this belief is wrong, not slightly off. Structurally, mechanically, precisely designed to produce a specific outcome, and that outcome is not your freedom. Nobody who profits from your hours wants you to see that clearly, but you are about to. The reason this matters to you right now today is not philosophical, it is numerical. And once you see the numbers, the whole architecture of how you have been spending your energy becomes impossible to unsee. Here is the question you are probably already carrying. If trading hours for money is a trap, why did everyone you trust tell you to do it? Your parents, your teachers, your first boss. Hold that question. The answer is coming, but it requires some groundwork first. Think about where you were 3 years ago. What were you working toward? Were you putting in extra hours, volunteering for overtime, taking on more projects, staying late because you believed that effort compounded? Most people answer yes. And here is the harder follow-up. Are you measurably, structurally closer to financial independence than you were then? Or have you simply maintained your position while the cost of everything around you quietly rose? That gap between effort and outcome is not your failure. It is the design. There was a man named Marcus who ran the logistics division for a regional distribution company for 31 years. Marcus was the person everyone pointed to when they talked about dedication. He arrived before anyone else. He left after the lights went off. He skipped vacations he had earned, covered for colleagues who were less committed, and wore 60-hour weeks like a badge of honor. His coworkers called him unbreakable. His bosses called him indispensable. His family called him on his birthday because that was mostly when they saw him. Marcus believed in a very specific equation: input plus loyalty equals security. He gave the company his best years with the confidence that a pension, a retirement party, and a comfortable exit were waiting on the other side of the finish line. When he was 58, the company restructured. His division was absorbed by a national firm. His pension, tied to a plan that had been quietly underfunded for a decade, delivered 60% of what he had expected. He retired at 62 with a modest savings account, a paid-off car, and approximately $4,200 a month to live on. He was not destitute, but he was not free. The number that haunts the story of Marcus is not the pension shortfall. It is the 31 years. 31 years of compounding effort that built equity, infrastructure, and profit for a company that was never his. His hours generated leverage that someone else held, and when the structure changed, his labor went with it. Everything he had built stayed behind. That is not a story about a bad company. It is a story about a bad architecture. The hourly wage model and its salaried cousin operates on a principle that sounds fair and is not. The principle is this: your time has a price, and if you show up consistently, you will receive that price consistently. This sounds like a deal. What it actually is a ceiling. Because the moment your time has a fixed price, the relationship between your effort and your outcome is permanently capped. You can work harder. You can take on more. You can compress sleep and cancel weekends and drink bad coffee at 6 in the morning in an empty office. But the ceiling does not move with your effort. It moves on someone else's schedule, for someone else's reasons. And here is the part your boss never explained, because your boss probably never saw it either. When a company pays you $100 an hour, or the salaried equivalent, they are not paying you what your hour is worth. They are paying you what your hour costs. Those two numbers are never the same. The gap between what your time costs them and what your time generates for them is called margin. And that margin is not returned to you at the end of the year. It is reinvested, compounded, and used to build assets that produce income while you sleep. Your effort becomes their leverage. Your finite time becomes their infinite return. This is not cynicism. It is bookkeeping. A person who owns a business does not scale by working more hours. They scale by building systems that work without them. That is not laziness. It is architecture. The wealthy person who golfs on a Tuesday afternoon while their investment portfolio earns dividends is not morally inferior to the person grinding through a double shift. They have simply built something that does not require their presence to continue producing. They exited the trade of hours for dollars and they entered the ownership of outcomes. What does that actually look like in practice? Consider a woman named Diana who spent 4 years as a freelance designer billing clients at an hourly rate she was proud of. She was good. Her rate climbed. Her inbox stayed full. But one afternoon she did the math that changed everything. She calculated how much she had earned in her best month and then divided it by the number of hours she had actually worked, including the client calls, the revision rounds, the invoicing, the tax prep. The number was much smaller than her stated rate. Then she looked at one of her clients, a small e-commerce brand she had helped build out. That client's store was now generating revenue every hour of every day, including the hours Diana was asleep. She had traded a fixed number of hours for a fixed sum. They had taken her output and attached it to something that compounded. The next year, Diana stopped selling hours. She started licensing her design system to businesses as a recurring monthly subscription. Same skill, different architecture. Her income did not triple overnight. But it stopped requiring her to be present for every dollar it earned. The design of the hourly wage is not a neutral system. It was built during the industrial era to solve a specific problem for factory owners. How do you extract maximum productive output from workers while keeping costs predictable? The answer was the wage. You price the hour, not the outcome. You pay for presence, not for results. And critically, you keep the worker focused on earning enough to survive the next month, which removes their attention from the bigger question of how wealth actually accumulates. You are not a factory worker, but you inherited that framework. And unless you examine it, you will run it for the rest of your working life. Here is the open loop closing now, the question you have been carrying since the beginning of this chapter. Why did everyone you trust point you toward this trade? The honest answer is that they believed in it. Your parents were not deceiving you. They were passing on the architecture they had received, the same one that had kept them working and just stable and never quite free. The teacher who told you to get a good job with benefits was not corrupt. They were sincere. But sincerity does not make a map accurate. The hustle gospel, the belief that exhaustion is virtue and busyness is progress, did not survive this long because it makes people rich. It survived because it keeps people productive on behalf of structures that are already rich. The swimmer in the water, arms churning, lungs burning, fighting the current, that swimmer is not failing. They are doing exactly what they were trained to do. The problem is the current. Later in this book, you will encounter something that directly contradicts what most people believe about passive income, what it is, who it is actually available to, and what most people get wrong in the first step. And once you see it, the contradiction will resolve in a way that changes how you act. But before that, you need to sit with one question, not about your finances, about your identity. You have likely built a significant part of who you are around how hard you work. The early mornings are part of your story. The extra effort is part of your self-respect. The exhaustion, somewhere beneath the surface, has become proof that you deserve better. What if the work itself is not the problem, but the structure the work flows into is? Because if effort is a river, the only question that matters is where it is running. Chapter 3. Laziness is just leverage with better PR. The most productive thing a wealthy person can do is nothing. That sounds like an excuse someone hands you so you stop asking uncomfortable questions. It is not. It is a description of a system that has already been built, already been set in motion, and is already producing output at this exact moment while its owner eats breakfast or sleeps or watches the rain come down. The confusion most people carry, and you may be carrying it right now, is the belief that work and wealth share a direct relationship. Work more, earn more. Rest less, get more. That equation is familiar because it was handed to you so early that it feels like physics. But it describes a world where only labor creates value, and the wealthiest people alive do not live in that world. They designed their way out of it. Here is the question that will run beneath everything in this chapter. If effort is a river, the only question that matters is where it is running. And right now, for most people, that river is running straight into the ground. Hold on to that image. It will mean something different by the time this chapter ends. There is a word that gets spoken in certain rooms, often expensive rooms, and that word is leverage. Not in the dramatic sense, not in the sense of power plays or corporate maneuvering. Leverage, in its simplest mechanical definition, is the ability to produce more output than your input should logically allow. A lever lets a child move a rock that would defeat 3 adults. The rock does not care who designed the lever. It moves the same either way. Wealth operates on exactly this principle, and the wealthy talk about it constantly among themselves in a language the rest of the world has decided to ignore. The rest of the world prefers a different story. Hustle. Grind. The 5 a.m. alarm, the 100-hour week, the vacation you will take someday. The story that suffering is a currency you deposit toward a future that always stays just out of reach. This story is not just unhelpful. It is the mechanism by which ordinary people stay exactly where they are while believing they are moving. Call it what it is, the hustle gospel, and the hustle gospel has a vested interest in your exhaustion. Think about where you were 3 years ago. Not emotionally, not philosophically, practically. Think about how many hours you worked in those 3 years. Think about what you were told those hours were building. Then ask yourself what those hours actually produced. Were the assets different? Was the money different? Or were you just more tired with a slightly longer list of things you had done, none of which were working for you while you slept? Most people answer that question and then change the subject. This chapter is about not changing the subject. Here is a name, Marcus Webb, not famous, not photographed for magazine covers. Marcus was 29 years old, living in a mid-sized city. Running a small software service business, he had built himself from 2 clients in his second bedroom to 11 clients spread across 4 states. He worked. He worked in the way the hustle gospel teaches, first one up, last one down, answering emails at 11 at night, personally handling every client request because he told himself that was the only way to maintain quality. His business was growing. His sleep was not. And somewhere around month 18, something quietly broke. Not dramatically, not in a single moment. It was a Tuesday when Marcus realized he had spent 4 hours that week explaining to new clients how to use his software platform, the same 4-step process, word for word each time with 4 different people. 4 hours. Gone. Traded for 4 conversations that produced 0 new value and could have been a 12-minute video recorded once. He made the video. Then he recorded 5 more. He wrote a simple onboarding document. He built a process for his 1 employee to handle the first 3 client interactions without Marcus touching them. It took him 9 days of concentrated effort, working differently instead of longer. The next month, he had those 4 hours back, and the month after, and every month since. He did not work less. Not at first. He redirected the work. He spent those 4 reclaimed hours building 2 new client intake systems that his employee could run. Then he hired a second person, trained them using the same documentation, and freed himself from another 8 hours of weekly repetition. 3 years after that Tuesday, Marcus ran a business generating more revenue than it had in its first 2 years, while he worked 11 hours fewer per week. His clients received better service because the systems were consistent in a way a tired human never is. And Marcus spent his recovered time on the only work that actually required him, developing new offerings and closing large accounts. Let that land for a moment before we move. The story is not about working less. This is the part the hustle gospel misrepresents when it tries to co-opt this idea. Marcus did not find a shortcut. He did not skip the hard part. He did the hardest thing most people never attempt. He looked clearly at where his effort was running and asked whether the ground there could hold water. It could not, so he built a channel. That is the principle, not laziness in the sense of avoidance. Laziness in the engineering sense, the deliberate refusal to do a task by hand when a system can do it reliably in your place. Every hour a wealthy person appears idle, a system they designed is converting time they already spent into compounding output. The idleness is not the point. The system is the point. The idleness is just the visible evidence that the system is working. You have been trained to respect the swimmer. The one churning through the water, arms burning, breath ragged, making visible progress through sheer effort. That image was handed to you as the definition of a person who is serious. And there is something real in it at the beginning when you are learning the water, when you are building strength, when you have no other option. Swimming is not wrong. The problem is when swimming becomes permanent. When a person spends 20 years in the water never asking whether they could float. Floating is not giving up. Floating is knowing the water well enough to let it hold you. And the water has always been able to hold you. You just never stopped moving long enough to find out. Now here is what most people do when they hear this idea. They nod. They feel something shift in their chest. And then they go back to their existing behavior because they have no concrete point of entry. The insight stays an insight instead of becoming a habit. So let's fix that. Right now, today, there is an exercise that takes less than 20 minutes and will show you exactly where your effort is running. It is not complicated. It is uncomfortable, which is different. Take any recurring task you perform in your work or your finances, something you do every week or every month reliably with your own hands and attention. It could be sending the same type of email, following up on the same type of request, reviewing the same type of number, explaining the same thing to different people. Pick one. One is enough. Now ask 3 questions. First, how many times have I done this exact thing in the last 12 months? Second, what would happen if this thing was done slightly less well but without my personal involvement? Third, what is the simplest possible way to remove myself from this task while keeping the outcome the same? The answer to the third question is your leverage point. It might be a document, it might be a template, it might be handing the task to someone else with clear instructions. It might be software that runs automatically. It does not matter what form it takes. What matters is that you do it once, set it in motion, and then never personally perform that task again. One task. That is the whole exercise. One removed task creates time. That time is not for rest, not yet. That time is for finding the next task, and the one after. Here is the open loop closing now, because this is where it resolves. The river of effort has not stopped running. The river never stops, but you are the one who decides where it runs. The swimmer in Chapter 1, remember, thrashing, exhausted, barely making progress. That was effort running against itself. Effort directed at surviving the moment, not building the next shore. What changes is not the amount of effort. What changes is the geometry of it. You stop running it straight into the ground. You build channels. You build systems. You point the river toward land that can hold it, land that will grow something. Later in this book, you will encounter something that directly contradicts what most people believe about passive income. And once you see it, the contradiction will resolve in a way that changes not just what you pursue, but how early you start building it. For now, stay with this. The wealthy person reading on the beach is not lazy in the way you were taught to fear. They are not avoiding. They are not lucky. They built something earlier, something deliberate and mechanical, and now that thing runs without them. The beach is the reward, yes, but more than that, the beach is the proof that the system is working, that the channel is holding, that the river is running somewhere that produces. You have been measuring effort in hours. Hours spent, hours visible, hours that others can observe and confirm and judge. That is the meter the hustle gospel gave you, and it serves the hustle gospel. It does not serve you. Start measuring effort in leverage. Every hour you spend now, ask what it will produce without you later. If the answer is nothing, the hour is swimming. If the answer is something that runs or pays or compounds after you stop touching it, the hour is building. Stop swimming. Build the channel, step back, and let the river do what rivers do. Chapter 4. The one decision that replaces 1,000 tasks. Something is leaving your life right now, and it is not making any noise on its way out. It is not your energy, though that goes too. It is your options. Every week you spend executing instead of deciding. Every month you invest in doing more of what already costs you everything you have. You are not standing still. You are moving backward, and the gap is widening faster than you feel it. Because effort compounds the same way money does. The wrong effort repeated long enough does not just waste time. It builds a prison out of your own discipline. The invisible mechanism is this. You have been optimizing tasks when you should have been eliminating them. And there is one question that can change this. Not a habit, not a morning routine, not a set of affirmations written on your bathroom mirror. One question. One decision that, made correctly, retires 1,000 future tasks before they ever arrive. This chapter is about finding that decision, and once you see how it works, you will not be able to unsee it. The river does not need your permission to run. You heard that in the last chapter. Build the channel, step back, and let the river do what rivers do. But here is what nobody tells you about building channels. Most people spend their lives digging in the wrong direction. Meet Diana. Diana was organized in a way that made other people feel lazy just standing next to her. She had color-coded spreadsheets for her budget, a task management app she reviewed every Sunday night, and a calendar so structured that she scheduled her own thinking time in 30-minute blocks. She worked in marketing, ran a small side business selling custom stationery, and mentored 2 younger colleagues voluntarily because she believed in paying things forward. She was, by any measure, impressive. For a decade, she got better and better at managing her time. She read books about productivity. She took courses on efficiency. She cut her email response time down to 90 seconds and automated her invoicing so it went out on the 1st of every month without her touching it. And every year, she made almost exactly the same amount of money. Not because she was not working, because she was working brilliantly on the wrong thing. Diana had optimized the execution of a system that had a ceiling built into it. She was moving faster and faster inside a container that could not grow. The invoicing automation saved her 40 minutes a month. The task app saved her from forgetting small things, but none of it touched the one variable that was limiting everything. She was the only person who could deliver her product. One Diana, one pair of hands, one calendar, 24 hours. No matter how efficiently she arranged those hours, the math would never change. She did not have a time problem. She had a constraint problem, and she spent 10 years solving the wrong one. Here is the thing about constraints. They are invisible until someone shows them to you, and then they are the only thing you can see. In manufacturing, there is a principle called the theory of constraints, and the core idea is simpler than it sounds. In any system, a factory, a supply chain, a life, there is always one bottleneck that limits the output of the entire system. Everything else flows through that bottleneck. So if you improve anything except the bottleneck, you improve nothing that matters. You just create a faster pile of work waiting in line. Think about what that means for you. Think about where you were 3 years ago. What were you doing more of back then? Tasks, hours, efforts, that you are still doing more of right now, and the result has not moved the way you expected. Not because you were not disciplined, because the thing you were disciplining yourself to do was not the constraint. It was something downstream of the real problem. And until the real problem is named and removed, every improvement you make to everything else is decoration. That is not a personal failure. It is a navigation error. And navigation errors are fixable the moment you understand where you actually are. So where is your constraint? That is the open question. Sit with it for a moment. Do not answer it yet, because the answer will only make sense after you understand what a constraint actually costs you when it goes unnamed. Diana's constraint was deliverability. She could only make so many products because she made every single one herself. She never hired. She never templated in a way that let someone else replicate her work. She kept her quality so idiosyncratic, so dependent on her specific touch, that the business became a machine with one irreplaceable part. And one-part machines do not scale. They just wear out the part. Now here is the question that changes everything. What is the one decision, not the one task, not the one habit, the one decision that would make the constraint irrelevant? For Diana, it was not hiring a full-time employee. She could not afford that. It was not buying expensive equipment. It was not outsourcing to a foreign marketplace. It was creating a digital version of her 3 most popular designs so they could be purchased and printed by the customer without Diana touching anything after the initial creation. One decision. One afternoon of reformatting files she already had. And overnight, the ceiling she had been pressed against for 10 years dissolved. She did not work harder. She identified the one point where her entire output was being strangled and she removed it. The 10 years before that were not wasted. She built real skill, real reputation, real customer trust. But those 10 years would have compounded differently, much faster, if she had seen the constraint earlier. This is what wealthy people do that looks like laziness from the outside. They ask one question obsessively. What is the one thing that, if removed or resolved, makes everything else either easier or unnecessary? And they answer that question before they answer any other question, before they optimize their morning, before they build their to-do list, before they take another meeting or send another proposal. Most people sequence it differently. They do all the tasks first and save the strategic thinking for when they have more time. But the time never comes because the tasks multiply. The inbox refills. The demands stack. The weeks blur into months and the months into years, and the constraint never gets touched because there was always something more urgent in front of it. Urgent is a trap. You already know this. But knowing it has not freed you from it yet, because knowing and applying are separated by one thing, a moment of deliberate decision made from stillness rather than pressure. Here is what that decision looks like in practice, and this part matters. The one decision is not always what you expect. Sometimes it is the person you hire to do the thing only you are doing. Sometimes it is the software that eliminates a process entirely. Sometimes it is a partnership, one clear agreement with one other person or entity that gives you access to a resource, a network, or a capability that previously cost you hundreds of hours to approximate on your own. And sometimes it is a decision to stop. To stop offering a service that costs you 40 hours a month and generates 15% of your income. To stop maintaining a relationship that requires constant management for unpredictable returns. To stop doing the thing that feels productive because it has always been on your list. Stop is the hardest decision to make, because stop does not feel like action. Stop does not feel like hustle. Stop does not look impressive when someone asks what you have been working on. But stop is sometimes the most precise, highest leverage move available to you. It is the negative space in the sculpture, the silence between the notes. It is removing the one stone that is holding the dam and letting the water go where it was always going to go eventually. Later in this book, you will encounter something that directly contradicts what most people believe about motivation, and once you see it, the contradiction will resolve in a way that changes how you decide which actions to take and which to abandon permanently. For now, stay with constraint, because here is what identifying your one constraint actually does. It does not just save time, it changes the quality of all your other time. When you remove a bottleneck, everything upstream of it starts moving differently. Your creative thinking improves because it is no longer rationed across 100 operational problems. Your relationships sharpen because you are not carrying the invisible weight of the unresolved drag. Your capacity for noticing opportunity increases because you have bandwidth to notice instead of just execute. You become, in a word, strategic. Not occasionally, in the one retreat you take per year where you think big thoughts and return to the same small motion. Strategic by default, because you made one decision that cleared the field. Think about a swimmer. You have heard about this swimmer before, back at the start of this book, thrashing and working and expending enormous energy just to stay in place, going nowhere fast. There is a version of that swimmer coming later in this story, a different posture entirely, a different relationship with the water. But here is the thing to notice now, just as a glimpse. The swimmer who is thrashing is not weak. The swimmer is skilled. The problem is not effort. The problem is direction. vertical effort in a horizontal world. When the swimmer discovers something about the water, about how the water actually wants to work, everything changes. That discovery is a single insight, one decision about how to position the body, and it replaces every desperate stroke. That is the mechanism this chapter is asking you to see, not more effort in the same direction, not better technique applied to the wrong problem. One clear identification of the one thing that is holding everything else back, followed by one deliberate decision to remove it or root around it. Now close the loop you opened earlier. Your constraint. You have been thinking about it since the mirror moment a few hundred words ago, even if you have not named it yet. You felt something when you read about Diana. Some recognition. Maybe a specific task came to mind. Maybe a specific relationship. Maybe a service you offer, or a method you use, or a way you have always done a particular thing because it is how you learned to do it, and you have never stopped to ask whether it still makes sense. Name it now. Not out loud if you do not want to. Name it in the part of your mind that already knows what is true. The naming is the decision. And one decision made clearly enough replaces 1,000 tasks you were about to add to a list that was already too long. So what is the one thing you are optimizing that is not actually the constraint? Chapter 5. Stop being an employee in your own life. Across every age of human civilization, there has been a small group of people who operated by a different logic than everyone around them. Not smarter, not more connected, not born under a luckier star. They simply held a different picture of themselves in their minds. While the majority defined themselves by what they did, the task, the trade, the output, this smaller group defined themselves by what they owned. Not property necessarily, not titles. They owned the process. They owned the system. They owned the relationship between effort and outcome. And because they saw themselves that way, they made decisions that no amount of clever tactics could have produced in someone who still saw themselves as a performer of tasks. That distinction between the doer and the designer is the oldest wealth gap in human history, and it runs straight through your life right now, today, in the way you spent the last 3 hours. What this chapter is going to show you is not a new strategy. It is a new self-concept, and without it, every strategy reverts. The previous chapter ended with a question. What is the one thing you are optimizing that is not actually the constraint? Sit with the shape of that question for a moment. Because here is what most people do when they hear something like that. They apply it to their calendar. They look at their schedule. They try to figure out which task is the bottleneck. They think productivity. They think time management. They miss the point entirely. The constraint is not on your calendar. The constraint is in the story you are telling yourself about who you are and what your job is. That story is running everything. It is more powerful than your morning routine, your investment account, or your 5-year plan. Here is the open loop this chapter is going to close. There is one question hiding in plain sight that you have almost certainly never asked yourself directly. Not because you are not intelligent enough, but because the culture you grew up in never encouraged it. The question is this: whose employee are you? Hold that. The answer will come. But first, you need to feel the full weight of where you are right now. Think about where you were 3 years ago. The version of you that existed then. What did a typical Tuesday look like? What was consuming most of your mental energy? Chances are, the shape of your effort has changed somewhat. Maybe the job is different. Maybe you earn more. But here is the honest question. Is the structure of your relationship with work fundamentally different? Are you still trading a specific number of hours for a specific amount of output and calling that progress? Because if you are, the number on your paycheck has changed, but the deal has not. That is the recognition most people avoid. Not because it is too complicated, because it is too close. Remember the drowning swimmer from earlier in this book. arms churning, legs kicking, expending maximum effort to stay in the same place, exhausted, determined, going nowhere fast. That image was introduced as a picture of what hustle gospel produces. But here is the image that has been waiting on the other side of this book. That same person on their back, arms at their sides, barely moving, floating, effortless, sustainable, covering more water with less fight. The difference between swimming and floating is not fitness. It is not strength. It is understanding how water works and allowing your body to cooperate with a force that was already there. The water was never the enemy. The frantic effort was. You have been told your whole working life to swim harder. Nobody told you that floating was an option. So what does floating look like in practice? It looks like owning processes instead of performing tasks. It looks like building something once that keeps producing a result without you present for every repetition. But before any of that becomes real for you, something has to shift underneath it. The identity has to change first. Strategy built on the wrong identity is like painting a wall that has no studs behind it. It looks fine until any real pressure is applied. Here is a parable. A woman named Renata spent 11 years working for a regional marketing agency. She was good. Genuinely good. The kind of employee who solved problems before her manager noticed them. She built client campaigns from scratch, tracked the data herself, adjusted copy when the numbers softened, and delivered results that consistently outperformed the industry average. She was promoted twice, given a raise 3 times. And still, every morning she sat down and waited to be told what to produce, not because she lacked initiative, because somewhere in her mind she had accepted a role. Her role was to execute. Someone else's role was to decide what got executed and why. One afternoon, her agency lost a major client. The partners gathered to discuss strategy. Renata sat outside that room. She had more data on that client than anyone inside the room, more insight, more context. But she was not invited because her job title did not include the word director. That evening she did not feel angry. She felt something more uncomfortable than anger. She felt invisible. And then she asked herself a question she had never asked before. She said, "Whose company am I actually building?" She quit 4 months later, not impulsively. Deliberately. She spent those 4 months designing a process, an automated client reporting system she had been running manually in her head for years. She packaged it. She licensed it. A year later, 3 agencies were paying her monthly to use something she had already built. She was not working harder. She was working as an owner of a process rather than a performer of tasks. The ending of that story is not the point. The beginning of it is. The moment Renata asked herself a single question, "Whose company am I actually building?" everything that followed became possible. Not easy, possible. And there is a specific distance between those 2 words that matters more than most people realize. Now here is the question this chapter has been holding since the 3rd paragraph. Whose employee are you? Not who pays you. That is a different question. This question goes underneath the paycheck, because here is what most people discover when they ask it honestly. They are an employee in their own life. They report to the job description someone else wrote. They measure success by metrics someone else defined. They allocate the one resource that cannot be replenished, their attention, according to priorities someone else set. And they do this not just at work. They do it at home. They do it on weekends. The employee identity is not contained by a job. It bleeds into everything. Identify one area of your life right now, just one, where you are trading hours for outcomes you could systematize. Not theoretically, specifically. One thing you do repeatedly, on a schedule, that produces a result someone or something else could produce if you set it up correctly. Maybe it is a report you generate every week. Maybe it is a conversation you have every month with the same category of person. Maybe it is a decision you make every time a specific situation arises, a decision that has never changed and never needed your fresh thinking, but still gets your fresh thinking every single time. That one thing is your entry point. Not into productivity, into identity, because here is the revelation this whole chapter has been building toward. Identity precedes strategy, every time, without exception. You can read every book about passive income, leverage, systems, and financial independence, and if you still see yourself as someone who performs tasks for outcomes, every tactic will revert to labor. You will take a system and manually run it. You will take an automated process and check it constantly. You will take a passive income stream and manage it like a second job. Not because you are doing something wrong, because you are being someone wrong. The shift that has to happen is not in your calendar or your investment account. It is in the answer you give yourself privately, without an audience, when someone asks what you do. If that answer is still a job title, a task, a skill you perform for pay, the shift has not happened yet. Later in this book, you will encounter something that directly contradicts what most people believe about patience and timing when it comes to building wealth. And once you see it, the contradiction will resolve in a way that changes the specific moment you decide to act. But right now, this moment, this chapter, the work is simpler and harder than any tactic. It is deciding to stop being an employee in your own life, not quitting anything, not burning anything down. Just changing the answer to one quiet internal question. Not what do I do, but what do I own? The architect does not carry every brick, but nothing gets built without the architect. Chapter 6. The lazy rich person you already are. You have been waiting for permission. You feel it even if you have not named it yet. Not permission from a boss or a parent or some credentialing body, permission from yourself. To stop treating exhaustion as evidence of worth. You have read the chapters. You have sat with the ideas. And somewhere underneath all of that sits a quiet, persistent voice asking, does this actually apply to me? Am I the kind of person this works for? You keep arriving at the edge of the water but not getting in. And the strange truth, the one this chapter is here to deliver, is that you have been standing at the edge of a pool you already own. The question is not whether you qualify. The question is why you keep auditioning for a life that is already yours. That question is not going to leave you alone. Good, hold it. The architect does not carry every brick, but nothing gets built without the architect. That line from the last chapter was not a compliment to architects. It was a description of you, the version of you that already exists right now, underneath the hustle you have been told to perform. Here is what almost no one is willing to say plainly. You already have assets, not financial assets necessarily. Not a portfolio or a real estate holding or a business with employees, but assets in the truest sense of the word, resources that can work independently of your direct labor. You have time you are currently spending on things that return nothing. You have knowledge that feels ordinary to you and would feel like revelation to someone 3 years behind you. You have a network of people, relationships, casual connections, former colleagues, neighbors, online acquaintances, that represents a web of trust you have never once tried to activate. These are inputs. And inputs are all leverage ever needs. Think about where you were 3 years ago, not in some abstract sense specifically. What did you know then that you struggled to find? What took you months to figure out that someone could have told you in 20 minutes? What mistake did you make because no one in your circle had made it yet and come back to warn you? Whatever that thing is, you now hold it. It lives inside you. Someone right now is making the version of that same mistake you already survived. That knowledge, that specific hard-earned understanding, is an asset you are currently letting sit idle. You are leaving it in a drawer. This is where the hustle gospel does its most invisible damage. It teaches you to measure your value and output in hours logged, in visible effort, in sweat you can point to. And because of that, you have been trained to dismiss the things that feel easy. If it does not cost you, the gospel says, it cannot count. If you are not tired afterward, you probably did not earn it. And so you ignore your easiest leverage, the things you know deeply and could share or systematize or package, because they do not feel like work. They feel too simple. Simple is not a flaw. Simple is the goal. Let me tell you about a woman named 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗡. She had spent 11 years working in pharmaceutical supply chains, routing, compliance, the tedious middle mechanics of how drugs move from a manufacturer to a hospital shelf. She knew this world completely. She found it boring. She assumed everyone who worked in logistics found it equally boring and equally obvious. When a friend suggested she start consulting, she laughed. Who would pay for things she already knew? When that same friend asked her to name 3 problems her current employer struggled to solve every quarter, she answered without pausing. She named 5. Her friend looked at her and said nothing. The silence was enough. 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗡 spent 3 evenings writing down what she knew. Not a course, not a brand, not a website. Just a document that described in plain language how the specific compliance problem she named could be solved. She sent it to 4 people in her network. 2 of them asked if she consulted. She said she did. Within 5 months, she had replaced her salary working 12 hours a week. She had not learned anything new. She had simply stopped treating her existing knowledge as worthless. What 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗡 did was not remarkable in execution. It was remarkable only in permission. She gave herself clearance to stop grinding for someone else's leverage and start building her own. Here is the open loop this chapter opened with. Are you really the kind of person this works for? Here is the close. You are exactly the kind of person this works for, because the kind of person this works for is a person with underused assets and a willingness to stop treating effort as identity. That is the only criteria. You already meet it. Now let's get concrete about the 3 assets you are most likely ignoring. The first is fractional time. You almost certainly have hours in your week, scattered, irregular, felt as too small to matter, that are neither rest nor productive work. They are just friction. Commute time, wait time, the 40 minutes before sleep where you scroll instead of think. These fragments added up across a month often total 15 to 20 hours. That is not nothing. That is a part-time job's worth of input, currently returning 0. The second is experiential knowledge. Like 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗡, you have lived through a specific professional or personal domain long enough to understand its hidden mechanics. You know where the bodies are buried. You know which conventional advice in your field is wrong. You know what the people entering that world desperately need but cannot find. That knowledge does not feel special to you because you live inside it. Familiarity is not the same as valuelessness. The third is relational trust. Your network is not your contacts list. It is the subset of people who would take your call, read your message, and take what you say seriously because they know you. Even a small network of genuinely trusted relationships contains more opportunity than most people ever activate. Warm trust is a scarce resource. You have some. You are not using it. These 3 inputs, time, knowledge, trust, are the raw materials of leverage. Every wealth-building structure described in this book, every system that earns while you are not working, was originally built from inputs exactly like these. Not from capital someone started with, not from a special opportunity, from the deliberate decision to stop dismissing what was already on hand. The hustle gospel told you that starting from where you are was not enough. That you needed more credentials, more resources, more time, more readiness. That you should wait until the conditions were cleaner and the path was clearer. It used your own ambition as a leash. That leash ends here. There is a swimmer who appeared early in this book, panicked, arms churning, fighting water that had no intention of fighting back. Exhausting themselves to stay in place because no one had ever told them what the water actually wanted from them. The water wanted one thing: surrender of effort. Not surrender of direction, not surrender of desire, surrender of the frantic expenditure that accomplished nothing except fatigue. The same swimmer later is on their back, arms out, chest to the sky. The water is doing what water does when you stop fighting it, it holds you. The swimmer is not working, the swimmer is moving. There is a current beneath them, slow and reliable and indifferent to whether they believe in it. They are going somewhere. Not because they earned the current, because they finally stopped exhausting themselves trying to outswim it. That is you, not someday. That is the description of what you become the moment you stop performing effort for its own sake and start designing systems that carry you. You have the knowledge, you have the hours, you have the relationships. You have spent years accumulating all of it while telling yourself you were not ready, not qualified, not the type. The hustle gospel needed you to believe that. A laborer who believes in their own insufficiency is a laborer who never becomes an architect. But you have read this far. Something in you was not satisfied with the gospel. Something in you already suspected the exhaustion was not the point. Listen to that part. Because the person you are about to become, the one who looks back at this period and understands it as the turning point, that person is not going to be defined by how hard they worked. They are going to be defined by what they finally decided to stop wasting. Here is what is true now. You know how leverage works. You understand that effort alone is a broken vehicle. You have looked at your own life and found the underused assets. You have seen that the only thing standing between your inputs and your architecture was a story, a cultural story about exhaustion and worthiness and what serious people look like when they are doing serious things. That story is not yours. It never was. You inherited it without choosing it. You performed it without examining it, and now you have examined it. The hustle gospel is dead. You are still. You are moving.